Before I say anything, I want to say that Schaefer Ellis is my favorite media reviewer, and just because we disagree on something, it doesn't mean that I've lost my respect for him or any melodramatic bullshit like that. This video is merely stating why I disagree with him, and as such, I'm not going to treat this like a takedown because that's just stupid. And that's not to say we disagreed with everything too, because we both really liked the Edie. I mean, how could you not? The song is adorable, and the art style within it is so heartwarming that I wish it's what they went with in the first place. Granted, it would clash with the fan service, so speaking of that, that's where our disagreements start to come in. I typically don't like fan service, not because I dislike seeing titties, because I obviously do, but rather because it's used to distract from either the plot or characters. When I care about the world you've made and the characters who inhabit them, it makes me feel gross when one of those characters stops the progression of a plot to a screeching halt just for me to ogle at them. This is why fan service has to be done in service of the plot. Usually it's done for comedy, and that works. However, I was genuinely impressed watching My Dress-Up Darling because its fan service actively makes the story better, and here I'm going to explain why. Of course, the first thing to note would be the measurement scene. I actually chose to skip out on this one during the winter season because I saw clips of this scene and just assumed it was some dumb ecchi schlock. I mean, Maureen isn't even my type, so why bother? I watched it though, because all my friends have been talking about it, and I'm so glad I did. This first episode instantly struck me as something special, but this is where yet another one of my opinions diverges from Schaefer Ellis, and it's one that I'll have to address first. Gojo is an amazing protagonist, and he steals the show. Even if I didn't find his backstory so relatable, I probably still would have liked him. It's not to say he's perfect, as he obviously has flaws, but I'll be getting to those later. Early in his life, his grandpa introduced him to the art of making Hina dolls, and he was instantly entranced with their beauty. Dedicating his whole life into making them, he was shunned by his peers for his bizarre and outdated interest. I relate to this a lot. I know most people are perfectly comfortable with being honest to people about their interests, but it's always been something I feared. I was bullied for liking anime back in middle school, and while the fact that I was an awkward autist who couldn't read the room was more likely what it was, it's something that has made me afraid to open up to other people. Sure, unlike Gojo, I had quite a few friends, but few of those connections run all that deep to me. I think that's what I liked so much about his character, as it was the first time that I had seen that struggle of mine presented through anime. Another part of this character that I also found really relatable was his refusal to believe that there was a problem to begin with. He may not have any social connections outside of his grandpa, but at least he spends all of his time into his passions of sewing. I think that's why the moment where Maureen tells him that he should have stood his ground against the people who used him, that it was such an impactful moment. Unlike Gojo, Maureen seems like the perfect girl. She stands her ground, is popular, and it's found out later that we were mistaken about her the whole time. Once Maureen sees Gojo using the sewing machine at the school, their secrets are unveiled. For the first time ever, someone doesn't think of him as a loser for his passions, but instead tries to understand him. Meanwhile, Maureen finally finds someone who could help her in her dreams of cosplay. Seeing how bad she is at it, Gojo agrees to help her. For the first time ever, these characters don't see judgment for the things they love. Gojo's passion isn't seen as weird, and Maureen's lack of skill isn't mocked. I think it goes without saying, but I loved the hell out of this first episode. I was so surprised by how good it was. Nobody told me that the fan service show about cosplay would end up really being about the fears of opening up to others and the importance of passion. Not only that, but it's also about how these two people who seem so different can connect over time. They help make up for each other's weaknesses, and it's that teamwork which makes for such a believable pair. They're willing to help each other at every turn, and it's what makes this series so sweet. Both Gojo and Maureen are such good characters because they do such a good job at amplifying those themes. Gojo in particular has been so stubborn that he's neglected to realize that there's more to life than making Hina dolls. Now pursuing his goals with someone else will give him the life that he's missed out on prior. This is why the point of it being an incel fantasy is so confusing to me. I can kind of see where it's coming from. This show does present itself as yet another rom-com where the awkward protagonist gets with a perfect girl, but that's not what the show is about. Hell, even if it was what it was about, then the point still wouldn't even make sense because Maureen isn't perfect. Sure, her flaws may be lacking, but her purpose in this episode is to be the antithesis to what Gojo thought she'd think of him as. That's why we don't get to see her flaws and vulnerabilities until later, because that's not the point. I'm just flabbergasted at this point. It's like he and others like him weren't even paying attention to it while they watched it. I've disproven every single argument, and it wasn't even difficult to do. It's called paying attention to the themes of the damn show! Granted, there is one thing left to mention, which is how Gojo could be reasonably perceived as annoying at first. His awkwardness could be grating to someone who actually touches grass, but it's all in service of setting up an arc, so I don't see where the problem lies. If Gojo doesn't change into a more confident person over time, then you lose out on a lot what makes this series so special. I think that covers everything though, so let's finally address the elephant in the room. Wanting to work on the cosplay right away, Marin finds Gojo's house and has him do her measurements. Of course, this process means that she has to show off a bunch of her skin, but she's wearing a swimsuit, so she genuinely doesn't see the problem. Meanwhile, Gojo is extremely uncomfortable. Some would see this scene as fan service with a dumb excuse attached to it. Meanwhile, I see the scene as an incredibly important moment for their characters. This moment doesn't exist to progress their characters, but rather to demonstrate them. It's there to show that Marin is so dedicated to her craft that she'll do anything in pursuit to that goal, while also showing how uncomfortable Gojo is around women. It exists to tell us what the goals for these characters will be throughout the rest of the series. Mari needs to learn to respect the boundaries of others, while Gojo has to learn to relax a bit. That's why I felt so satisfied by the last episode, as the characters had come so far by the end of it all. Of course, there's still more growing to do, but of course there'd be. This show is pretty fast-paced, but it's not to the point where it comes at the detriment of their romance. Frankly, I see the romance as nothing more than a secondary feature to the message of chasing your dreams, so the fact that it's this well executed to begin with is very impressive. That's why I appreciate this episode so much, as it develops both of these things while also being able to have fan service in it. This is the first anime I've ever watched which has somehow welded plot and fan service at the same time. It's incredibly well done. So to see it be derailed by so many people and be described as nothing more than cheap incel bait is insulting. Also, I couldn't find a good time to mention this, but there's a scene within the episode where Marin gets embarrassed once Gojo accidentally gets too close. It's a scene which confirms that she genuinely didn't see how awkward this was until that very moment. I actually think that's the scene in particular which endeared me to her character. She's so dead set on making the best cosplay she can that she was neither able to respect Gojo or realize that she had any boundaries to begin with. Again, scenes like these are further proof that this episode's intention isn't to develop the characters, but instead show you who they are, what they need to improve at, and where you can expect them to be later on. It's for all these reasons that I just can't agree with Schaefer-Ellis's take on the series. Sure, I understand being made uncomfortable by this scene, hell, even I was, but to deny how good it is because of that is simply not something I can agree with. I especially feel this way because it continues to be well utilized even into the later episodes. Sure, I will agree that there are some fan service scenes, particularly in the first episode, that feel out of place. However, most uses of it exist to show off what I've already explained. There's actually a point where these become less frequent too, as Marin starts to respect Gojo's wishes. However, by the time we get to the last cosplay of the season, they start to show up again because Gojo starts to finally grow more comfortable with her. The series started with a fanservice scene that showed off how far apart they were, and ended by showing how close they became. It's really well done how they were able to use it, and I hope I've made my points clear by this point. Despite this, there are some things I still need to make clear. Given how I used this review as an excuse to review the first two episodes, you'd expect me to just continue doing that, yet I don't actually have that much else to say about the series itself. Because of this, I'll complain about the smaller aspects of the review. Now, I've already explained why I believe the series to be more than a horny incel fantasy, so I won't try to sound like a broken record here. One thing I forgot to mention though is the quantity of fanservice. Chances are he was being comedically hyperbolic here, however, I find this claim to be kinda dumb. Either I'm so desensitized to this shit that I simply didn't notice, or it's just false. It could be either, honestly. I don't really know, nor do I truly care. I mean, I've already explained how I found some of these scenes to be out of place, but I've also explained why that just doesn't bother me. He says too that these scenes bury any of the romance and cosplay aspects of the series, which I also disagree with. As I've explained already, the romance is tied directly to the fan service, and even if it wasn't, then it would still be super sweet. An example I'll pull from is one that shows up by the end of the first arc. It's after choosing to help her with a cosplay under such a tight deadline that Gojo had put in the most effort he ever had into his craft. For him, seeing Marin having fun is all he needs to make him feel happy. Despite this, Marin ends up screwing up the cosplay, but Even so, what he tells her makes for one of the best moments in the series. Telling her a few episodes prior that he preserves the word beautiful only for when he truly means it, it makes the moment where he calls her beautiful all the more impactful. Then sleeping due to the overwork he's faced, Mari now has to grapple with his feelings for him. Realizing that she likes him as more than just a friend is what makes her decision to respect him more as a person makes so much more sense, while also being so well earned. It's this moment which is able to make the rest of the series so strong. So yes, even without the fan service, My Dress-Up Darling is still an incredible romance. At least to me. On the cosplay side though, I'd say it's probably the most boring aspect of the series to me. It's not to say it's bad though. As a supplement to the romance, it works quite well, and being able to learn about something that I once had no knowledge on is nice too. Despite this, it only works as a supplement. The most cosplay focused arc is the second one, and it's easily the weakest. It's not bad, it just lacks what makes the series so enjoyable to me. The last point he made, though, is that Maureen seemed specifically designed to appeal to incels, and even though she obviously does appeal to that crowd with her otaku personality and conventionally attractive design, I still don't know how that's a problem. As long as she's well written and likable, then I don't see an issue with it. Hell, I do think she's well written, which is why this feels like such a non-argument to me. The last thing he points out, though, is how the show is evidence to why people avoid anime, which is hilarious to me. This was the biggest first season of an anime in the winter season. How the hell does that point to a disapproval towards this kind of story? Anime's been blowing up over the last few years, and this is yet another one that new fans are getting excited over. I think that transitions well to my general confusion surrounding his review. Schaeferless is a great reviewer, does a great job at explaining his thoughts on what he watches. He does such a good job at articulating himself that I'd occasionally find myself with a changed opinion due to one of his videos. Granted, I'm not stating my disagreement with a 30-minute video, and I'm instead doing so with a Letterboxd review that you can finish reading in a minute. It feels odd to be so harsh on this review when it doesn't even have the time to properly explain itself. That's why I tried to disconnect this from him to an extent, because it feels shitty to call his opinion invalid for these reasons. Come to think of it, I don't like calling opinions invalid to begin with, which is why I made it clear that this isn't a takedown of any kind. I mostly just made this video because I really liked My Dress-Up Darling, and I wanted to talk about it. This was simply the vehicle I used to do so. With that said, I think now it's time to close up. Normally, I'd end my videos asking why I care, but it's a lot clearer to me now. I made this video because I really enjoyed My Dress-Up Darling, and wanted to show people that they'd have a strong chance of enjoying it too. It took me so long to watch it precisely because I read reviews from people like Schaeferless, and had my preconceptions spoiled by those opinions. This isn't to say they're not allowed to share those opinions, by the way. We always need a yin to the yang. The point I'm trying to make is that you can't look at the yin without the yang, and vice versa. There's always another opinion, and that's why I wanted to share. So, stop listening to me now and watch My Dress-Up Darling. It's a solid 7 out of 10 that I'd highly recommend.